Hey, Bobby Motor.
Hey, my name is Riley.
Hey everybody, this is Michael and you're listening to Speculo Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Speculo Live podcast. We are on episode 16 now. Super grateful to have a really important guest, somebody that is part of an ecosystem that we at first unintentionally kept running into, and then suddenly it just organically kept happening. And then, as you know, we tend to go to a lot of events, and we just found that we were constantly crossing paths, and that group is Corded. The leadership team there, the sales team, everyone has been such a great group to work with fluidly. We have a lot of partners that are in their world and our world at the same time. And essentially, we just found this place where, it's just impossible to ignore the opportunity to have conversations together about the future of real estate. So wanted to welcome Sean Soderstrom here. Thank you so much, man. CEO of Corded. We're grateful for your time. I know you're super busy.
Thanks, Michael. Similarly, we hear just wonderful things from customers that we have in common about what you guys are doing. And you're obviously on the cutting edge of some of these new aspects of AI in real estate. And I'm sure we're going to get some time to talk about that today. So appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. Well, listen, for those that don't know much about you, you've got a really robust background in this real estate world. I'd love for you to touch on some of that, everything from Compass to McKinsey Real Estate, all of that. Can you maybe just share with everybody that's listening who you are, what you're doing, how you got here, all that fun stuff?
For sure. So I spent 7 years at the consulting firm McKinsey & Company, and so worked in a variety of industries. The second time I was there, I was very focused on building out their real estate practice. And so this was kind of coming at a time when things like advanced analytics and predictive analytics, machine learning were becoming slightly more important in the way that brokerages and developers and online listing portals were thinking about optimizing their businesses. And so I and my co-founders had the opportunity to work with a lot of different companies in the space and really get exposed to some really modern new technology. And we were actually deploying that, building that for many of the companies that we worked with. And so it was a really exciting time and a good experience for me to kind of get to know real estate quite broadly. I also, as you mentioned, worked at Compass in the early days. Compass, obviously now quite a large company and in the news, depending on when you're recently for potentially making some bigger acquisitions. And so for me, I was the first person at Compass to think about anything outside of New York City. And so I think I joined when there were about 30 people at the company. I led expansion and growth for the company nationally, which at the beginning there was no job to do because we were just a few agents in New York. And after a couple of years, we were in 8 states, 45 offices, 1,000 agents plus. And it was kind of a fun experience because I got to kind of lead all of that. And it was very operationally intensive to scale a brokerage, as many of the folks listening will know, right? The business of getting a managing broker and opening an office and finding a space and agents not liking a WeWork because you're trying to move fast and convincing them to join when you don't have a brand or a technology or anything really to offer them. It was kind of tough goings back then. And, we made it work. And obviously now that company's kind of grown significantly. And I think it's a lot of those two experiences together that kind of brought me to where I am now, which is running Corded, which is, we think of it as a data and analytics platform. The kind of thing that we're known for is helping brokerages and teams with agent recruitment, agent retention, and then market and competitive research. And I think that the experience at Compass, was my job to help grow that brokerage and to kind of build out what was a kind of a new recruiting function for the company. And we were looking through, Real Trends rankings to figure out who are the best agents in San Francisco. The issue with that is agents need to fill those out themselves. They're outdated. You get it, 9 months after it's published. It doesn't tell you what neighborhoods they focus on. And so, we were kind of looking at the data that was available to us at the time and also at the same time hearing, there's so much data available in real estate, right? Real estate's one of those really exciting industries that's going to be transformed by the data opportunity. From my perspective for recruiting and retention, we were kind of flying blind with respect to, who are the right agents, or internally, which agents should we pay attention to because they're struggling, or who needs a celebration this afternoon because they did something interesting this afternoon. Those are the types of things that we weren't able to do. And I think that's where, my co-founders and I kind of set out to try to bring data in a way that we could more easily generate insights on and also take action from, in a way that kind of wasn't being done in the industry so far.
Wow. That's great. Oh man, so many questions there. So McKinsey is one of those brands that just does all the sexy things. You guys dives into so many different industries, right? Why real estate? What about it was like, you're like, this is my thing. Like this is the sexiness, and obviously the Compass side of things, but was there a connection between the two that made you say this will be my focus?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I kind of told that story out of order. So I actually started at McKinsey, went to Compass, went back to McKinsey, and then came to Corded. So what I was interested in when joining and starting at McKinsey was large industries that I felt were not particularly modernized, and where industries could really kind of change based on the fact that they potentially weren't taking advantage of data or technology or whatever else. So actually, when I first started at McKinsey right out of college, I was doing quite a lot of work in healthcare. And I think healthcare and real estate have parallels to one another, right? Very, very large industries. Healthcare is actually more regulated than real estate. You typically don't have a single winner take all dynamic in the industry, which is kind of interesting. There's a lot of potential with data, but it's not optimized. And then you have a lot of regional differences, right? In healthcare, you have a lot of state by state regulation that kind of changes how the business is done. And so that was kind of interesting to me. I then went to Compass, got my feet wet in real estate, got really excited about it, and was really excited about brokerage. But my view after Compass was quite Compass centric. Like I had a view of what a brokerage should do was very much influenced at the time by what Compass was doing. And so I got a call from the folks at McKinsey to come back and to help build out their real estate practice, where McKinsey really didn't have, up until that point, a really big focus on supporting the real estate industry. And so the opportunity to come and lead some of those efforts was really interesting to me. But I definitely caught the startup bug when I was at Compass. So when I joined, again, it was a very, very small company. And so I kind of looked at Robert Refkin, who, I had a lot of admiration for. And I was like, I'd like to try to be Robert, as crazy as that sounds, right? I'd like to try, maybe I'll fail, but at least I'll put myself out there, and it'd be kind of fun to start something and see what happens. And so took a few years, but eventually kind of got to that point.
That's awesome. Wow, man, you're laying some great roads. I'll tell you right now, like we were talking about this before we jumped on here. It's very rare that we don't hear someone talk about Corded when we're having leadership calls with potential clients, right? And all in great ways. And I think, that just resonates with the leadership you've obviously brought to this. And I think, you guys should be very excited about that, because right now in this industry, I think everyone is suffering from tech fatigue at all levels, right? So many platforms, so many different tools and technologies. And then all of a sudden, just when you think it couldn't get any bigger, then AI pops up. So now it's just constant data, constant influx of tech. So for someone to look at adding a new platform, I think it takes quite a bit. But I will say, I think you guys are hitting a place that has been lacking with technology. I think from a perspective of recruiting, I think you guys are clearly hitting a home run. And I do want to ask, where do you think that brokerages are getting it wrong, and where do you guys think that you're getting it right? Because as someone that was in the Keller Williams ecosystem, they put a lot of time, effort, and money into creating something that they called Heat Seeker. And Heat Seeker was essentially a tool to be used by, the market center leadership to predictively do analysis to find out when is there a propensity for someone to move, right? And it missed the mark, right? And I personally don't know that to be excessively true, other than for the feedback I hear from other market center leaders. When I ask them, how is that going? They say Corded is substantially better. So where do you think that brokerages are missing the mark on their recruiting, and where are you guys excelling?
Yeah, thank you for saying positive things about Corded. And obviously, I can't speak to Heat Seeker. I haven't seen that product myself, right? So,
Yeah.
But I think there's a kind of I'll answer that question a little bit more broadly first, and then I'll get into the specifics. So I think for anyone who's, maybe thinking about creating a new product or even creating a technology startup, is a very dangerous trap that you can fall into, which is, and it's a very common one, which is, here's this new cool tech. Where can I apply it? Right. And the analogy there is like, it's a hammer looking for nails, right? You buy the hammer and then you're walking around the house trying to figure out where you can use it. I think that's a dangerous place to be in, right? I think that the right way to do it, at least in my opinion, is to take more of the design-led thinking, right? So the type of thing that like Brian Chesky at Airbnb would say, which is like, let's first focus on the customer and what the customer's problem is. Let's not talk about what we can do yet. And in Airbnb's case, right, it was like, I don't have enough options for where I want to stay. And the stock, right, the available inventory is like a hotel, and that's not perfect for example, a family with 4 kids, right? And they all don't want to be in different rooms, right? So that could be like a user problem that you want to start with. So we kind of did the same thing with Corded up front, which was, okay, what's the user problem? And this is actually one that I had experienced, right, which is recruiting and retention are absolutely critical to the core business of a brokerage, right? And we see between 15 and 20% of agents moving between companies every year. So if you just take that and you say, okay, I have 10 agents, I'm going to expect that 2 are going to leave over the next year. I need to now recruit at least 2 similarly producing agents to just maintain my market share. So because of the rate of movement, there's this constant need to try to keep the back door closed, right? Keep your good agents with you that are producing, but then also open the front door and invite more people to come into the company, right? So that's the kind of the core problem. I think what I can only speak to what I was doing at Compass, right? We were throwing a lot of people at the problem. So we had a lot of people focused on recruitment around the country. And, and of course I was as well. And what we were doing was at Compass, we kind of professionalized recruitment in the sense of we split the responsibility of recruitment away from the manager. So manager can be quite focused on retention and productivity of agents, and then recruiter can be more focused on that. And in spite of that innovation, we still weren't as efficient as we could be because we had a couple of different problems. And this kind of gets more specifically to your question. And I'll answer it quite simply, I think, in a way that is really easy to understand. There's a problem of who we're going after. There's a problem of when we're going after them. There's a problem of what we're saying to them, and also how we're saying it to them. And if you don't optimize all of those, then you can find yourself, reaching out to people who don't engage with you. You could find yourself, reaching out to people who are excited to join the company who you don't want them to join. You could you could be spending a whole bunch of time doing research, and then the agent doesn't engage with you. And so that was kind of influencing the way I was kind of thinking about this from the outset. And so the way that we approach it is we focus on the who, right? So identifying who is the right fit for your company, right? That could be based on the types of agents that are moving. That could be a machine learning algorithmic prediction on who's likely to leave their brokerage. That could be a sales volume segment that is really interesting and profitable to you. That could be agents at a stage of their career where they could take advantage of your value proposition, which, for example, is being really, really world-class at listing focused marketing, right? So you want to find those agents who are doing listings or who are about to cross the chasm and start doing a whole bunch of listings. And so who you go after in the first place is sometimes overlooked. People sometimes say, I'm just going to recruit experienced agents. And then the question is, okay, now I have to start recruiting. Where do I begin? Because I've got 20,000 experienced agents in my market that I could possibly reach out to. I have no idea where to start, right? And so it starts with kind of who you want to go after. Then I think most people overlook when to reach out to the agent, right? Mm-hmm. So, you could say, I have free time, so now is the time for me to reach out to the agent. But if we apply that design-focused thinking, it should be, when does the agent want to hear from me, right? Let's have some empathy for the person that we're trying to recruit. In that case, we might exclude people who are busy with five pending and active listings and pending transactions right now. We might exclude people, who are kind of in the middle of working with their buyers and sellers. We might prioritize people who, for example, haven't made money in the last 90 days and might be a little frustrated financially as to what's going on, right? So when is really important. And then what do we say? Right. And I think this is curious because you spend a lot of time at Speculo with voice AI, and I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. The way we think about it is generally, and this is again my experience at Compass back in the day, we're having to make a really difficult decision between two things. Either we're really efficient, and really efficient means I'm going to send 300 agents the same email, or I'm really effective. And really effective for me used to be 40 minutes of research across Realtor.com, Zillow, Brokerage profile, and the MLS, and maybe Real Trends to eventually get to something where they don't pick up the phone. And so there's this tension between effective and efficient. And I think what the interesting opportunity with modern technology these days, especially AI-driven technology, is you can be both efficient and effective at the same time. So a platform can actually develop something that is specific to the sender, specific to the recipient, celebratory about something that just happened a few minutes ago. And that can be really delivered, and the system can get to know you better as you kind of go through that process. And so that, I think, is the really interesting part of what kind of new technology can do, is it can really transform that action that you take with the agent and deliver much higher results, higher conversion rates, and much shorter sales cycles, because you can get a lot more throughput. And you do all of that without devaluing your brand. Right. And that's kind of another kind of attention that you need to pay attention to, which is, are we proud of the things that are going out to the agents? Because with agent recruiting, there's a finite number of agents that you want at your company, right? Some will join and some will leave the industry, but ultimately there are not millions of agents that you can recruit. So you do have to be careful about how you interact with them, because you're not, unfortunately, not in a position where you can burn lots of bridges with agents that you want to build connections with.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you touched on some good data points there. 15 to 20% of agents are going to move. That, is that a constant that you're seeing just now, or has that historically always been the case?
It's actually very consistent year over year. So it oscillates between about 15.5% and 18.5%. But it's very consistent when you look year over year. So part of the reason that, companies like Keller Williams have been successful is they've had a focus on trying to recruit, and that's part of the DNA of the company, right?
Yeah.
And so you actually end up seeing the trough, so like the 15.5% in the slow market, and then you end up seeing 18.5% in the up market. So we now have rates, below 6.5%, hopefully coming down further. I would actually expect more agents to move within a fairly tight band, but more agents to move over the coming, call it 24 months, given what we're kind of expecting from a macroeconomic.
Love that. From the data you look at, what do you think is like one of the top reasons that you see agents move? I know it's a plethora of things. Is there one thing that stands out that you're like, this is a defined characteristic of agents that are?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So let me add a couple data points, and then I'll answer your questions.
Yeah, please do.
So we have between 15.5% and 18.5% of agents moving.
Mm-hmm.
That equates to, over the last 12 months, $480 billion of sales volume.
Woo.
And $12 billion of commissions that switch brokerages in a year. That actually doesn't include a new agent who joins, like new to the industry, who ends up doing a couple of deals in the first year. So that's the experienced agent recruiting kind of TAM, or like market opportunity. So it's large and it's exciting, and that's, I think, the opportunity, right? Of course, like they can leave your company, and so you have to be careful about that from a defensive perspective.
Yeah.
So we can look at that, and I look at that, and we can see all those numbers. I was sitting there with Mike Del Prete, who's kind of an industry commentator, strategist, and we were looking at the numbers together. We're like, but what we're looking at are numbers that represent human behavior. So how do we answer your question, which is like, what are the real, like, human reasons that someone leaves a company, stays at a company, things like that? So we actually commissioned some independent third-party research. So we paid kind of a research firm that was like totally unbiased, and they interviewed agents, so deep, qualitative, 45-minute long interviews with agents who had switched brokerages in the last 12 months, who all had between 3 and 35 million in production over the last 12 months. So all producing and all switched recently. We also have, a series of questions. And I think what was interesting was when we asked them, like, what are the reasons that drive kind of loyalty to a brokerage. It kind of fell into two camps. The first camp was totally obvious to me, which was, and I would have expected. So it's in the practical loyalty bucket. So things like splits, like, is the split fair? Is the training supportive of me? Is the brand something that I'm proud to associate with? What does, the marketing look like? Those types of things. Those are all practical, right? And within that, commissions and splits, I should say, are considered table stakes. So you see agents who do select a lower split, but they select a lower split when they expect that their total take-home income is going to increase. So they may go from a higher cap to a lower cap, or low cap to higher cap, only making that decision to go to their higher cap, for example, when they believe that they'll actually make more money in aggregate. So therein lies an important communications piece if you're recruiting somebody on a kind of to a quote unquote less attractive offer, is they need to be convinced of the value that you are providing to them that will translate in more deals happening and more sales volume happening under their belt over the coming year or two. So that's one thing. And I kind of expected to hear that. What I didn't expect to hear was the other side, which was emotional loyalty. And that side was more about, what does it feel like to work at this company? And I often overlook that because I think I'm generally a little bit more of an analytical person. So I think about kind of the practical things that a brokerage offers.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting, that agents were talking about things like, did leadership reach out to me when I was struggling? Do they celebrate me without me telling them that I just did this, had this, right? And so this kind of interaction, this proactive interaction between a sales manager or a team leader or a brokerage executive with the agent was a critical component. A quote saying, they want to be seen as a whole person, right? Not just another number on a spreadsheet. Those are the types of things that drive frustration when they don't happen, and also drive loyalty when they do happen, right? And I think there was a quote that I loved that came out from it. Like we just asked the agents, what one sentence would summarize kind of like a great brokerage to you that you would encourage your brokerage to adopt? And the quote was, big enough to back you, small enough to know you. And I think that quote kind of like encapsulates what we're talking about here. Big enough to back you is like the practical stuff, right? Like we have the network, we have the brand, we have the resources, we have the support, the training, the split, everything else. But small enough to know you incorporates you could even change that to small enough to support you, right? That encompasses like the connection with the leadership, proactivity, what it feels like to actually work here. And so I thought that was, that was really interesting and kind of eye-opening for me, was that we shouldn't, as we think about being more profitable and we think about, giving more in terms of split and taking more cost out of the brokerage, we can't lose sight of that. What does it feel like to work here?
Yeah. Wow, that's great. I mean, if I'm a team leader in the Keller Williams lingo, or if I'm a brokerage team owner, or I'm responsible for recruiting, I'm hearing, get all the necessary tools to feel like there's a solid structure to help me do my job at its peak, but also don't negate the cultural team building check-ins, one-on-ones that come with having that small brokerage feel.
Totally. And I think there's additional nuance that, again, like, let's be honest, like I think it's complicated to run a brokerage, and we both of us work to support our brokerage and team clients, and it's a difficult job, right?
Yeah.
The additional nuance that makes it more complicated, and that came up in the research, was XYZ training or XYZ tool didn't feel like it was kind of purpose built for me. Right? It wasn't customized to my journey, right? And so you can imagine you have this great training that's like how to grow your buy-side clients. If you mandate that a listing heavy agent go through that training, or if you tell the listing heavy agent in the recruiting meeting, this is the best part about our training, is like we're really focused on like buy-side farming, they may say, and they forced me to go through all these trainings that were like useless to me. Right?
Yeah.
You can totally understand how that could happen and like how you could talk about it. And so it's like, person needs to kind of attach themselves to a slightly different configuration of what you offer at the company level or in the team level, so that each journey feels kind of specific to them. And that's really difficult to do. And so I think that's part of the thing that, we try to encourage and coach our clients on is kind of customizing the outreach, customizing the value proposition. And then, of course, once they join, they need to not be kind of forced to do the exact same thing that every other agent's doing, because then it can start to feel like it's overwhelming or kind of bureaucratic, where the brokerage is really just trying to add more and add more support because they've been asked to. But thinking about how that's customized to each agent, I think, is also important.
It brings up a good question. Like, obviously, data being a main driver of key indicators if someone's ready to move. Do you think there is a data point or a couple data points that show that someone is missing or lacking those things that can then make them a highly recruitable opportunity?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'll say one qualitative and one quantitative. So in the deep research, qualitative research that we did with the agents, all of them said that there was a period of time that they became demotivated and had a lack of energy at the company before they left. And they said things like, I stopped caring so much, it became less fun, and then eventually I left. Like eventually, on that bad day that they were struggling, they got like one call from that one company, and then they decided to pick up the call and activate the process. So that window of opportunity is actually a good thing if that's your agent, because that's a window of opportunity where you can turn things around. So that's piece number one, right?
Yeah.
I think the second piece is we use production data, not data around did you attend the training and how happy are you 1 out of 5 at the company, which of course you can add to all of this. And the production data we build into large quantitative models. So a lot of us have experience with large language models. This is kind of the underpinning of generative AI and ChatGPT. It's also large language models are the underpinning of Speculo and the voice AI things that you guys are doing. Large quantitative models is a different branch of AI that's more focused on analyzing patterns in numbers and data. So what we do is we look back at 20 years of data and we can understand what happened to Michael, the agent, 15 years ago when he either decided to join or decided to stay at his company. And what was going on in his business, in the market, in his office, all of these different kind of criteria of kind of how to analyze his business. And then based on that, we're looking for patterns that are kind of longitudinally consistent over time, meaning that principle applies irrespective of markets or maybe in that same market cycle later. And the result of that for us is we can predict 4 out of 5 agents before they leave their brokerage successfully. So no doubt we could layer on additional data sets to make that more accurate. Often people will ask us when we say, oh, we can predict 4 out of 5. Oh, you must be somehow looking at their Google searches and, whether they like the other agent at the other companies, like on Instagram. Certainly if you knew that, like use it, right?
Sure. Social data is important.
Yeah, we don't have like a really good record of that goes back 20 years. And so it's hard to kind of append those to our models. But certainly there are probably some alternative data sets that you could look at that are interesting. But, our customers generally find 4 out of 5 is pretty helpful. And so we kind of start with that. And then it's not just knowing that the agent is likely to move, right? It's then what do you do with that insight? Right? Silly, stupid analogy is like you go to the hardware store and you buy like the ultimate power drill, right? Just because you have the power drill doesn't mean anything happened. Like you actually need to go use it. You need to like develop a plan to build a cupboard and then like go build a cupboard with the power drill and it saves you some time, right? And so just knowing that they're going to move isn't really like, that's the beginning of the process, right? And then the question is like, how quickly do you reach out to them? And do you say something to them that really got their attention, right? So often we try to kind of reverse engineer this process of like, oh my God, how did you know that about me? No one knows that about me, including myself. I had no idea that is the highest close to list price ratio listing that I've ever sold. And I didn't know that it was, and if you can say that to them and their experience can be like, wow, I didn't know that. You've got my attention at least. This doesn't sound like one of the other calls that I got today. Then, the conversion rate can be a lot higher on that. So I'm curious to kind of like turning it back to you guys, right? You're obviously pioneering this kind of really interesting technology, and agents are using it, team leads are using it, brokerages are using it. Like, what are kind of the most common use cases that you find for this highly scalable voice AI approach that you guys are undertaking?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, as how it rolls into what you're doing and what things you just touched on, our difference maker really is our contextual calls, right? So we're not following any kind of defined scripts. Our AI has an awareness and an educational component to it of how to have a real estate call, how to focus on, traditional questions. And then it just teaches itself from there in a responsive language. It's continually pulling context from multiple data points that it has access to have that contextual call. To your point, driving that awareness of an agent's activity or milestones to have, like, wow, this is really interesting to me. Like, thank you for actually doing the research and talking about something I care about, right? So, that's really how we're seeing it as well. It's like that's leading to a lot deeper conversations. We were just on a conversation with a rather large team, one of the largest teams in the country, about a relationship, and one of the calls we looked at, the person was on the phone with the AI for 18 minutes, and like we listened to it. I thought maybe it was an error or something, because typically it's a 5 to 10 minute conversation, because our AI is also designed to get off the phone as quickly as possible, because we want the subject matter expert to be the one in the conversation. It's where we're different, is that our AI is not meant to replace the agent. It's actually meant to encourage more relationships with the agent and the actual contact. But because of how much context we're bringing in, it suddenly aligns itself with the goals and the vision of what that contact has. And so really that's where we're seeing a lot of it move as well, is that people, they don't want to be transactional. They want to be experiential and relational. And oddly enough, it is coming as our AI voice it's not the difference maker there. It's just the introductory component of the relationship itself. All the data that we're pulling is based on who they are, or how they are showing up in the opportunity that is a buy side or a sell side opportunity. So we just have really spent a lot of time engaging with our AI and letting it be relational from the context of additional data. So it's really been interesting to see how that's resulted in not just higher conversions, but deeper relationships as well, because it doesn't just do a reactionary outreach. It'll proactively establish itself as a touch point for your contacts continuously. So as time goes on and more context is gained, it understands everything from timeline to specific housing prices to areas you're looking at, school districts, like whatever that thing is. So, I would say that's a big place where we're seeing a lot of synergies or alignments in striking when the iron is not just hot, but at the right time, because it can be hot and still not be the right time. And so, we're seeing a lot of really incredible interactions and results just from the incorporation of contextual information, data-driven conversations that then result in relationship building handoffs, live transfers.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. A lot of parallels between what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so we talk about recruiting, like how are you seeing market centers use retention? Because you kind of touched on it before, using your tool for retention. And I'm really curious if you're seeing a lot of that from your client base as well, because if they're aware of the markers for someone to go, then, adversely, they should be aware of the markers that someone to have that opportunity to insert themselves to make sure someone is staying, right?
Yeah, for sure. So there are a number of different ways that we kind of help facilitate that. Really big push on the retention side within Corded. So first, you get kind of a top-down view of your company. That could be at the franchisee level, could be at the brand level, could be at the office level. And you can also compare your company to other companies, right? So you can do benchmarking, market share, those types of things. One of the things that's, I think, interesting for people to look at is we have this view of the agents that you've recruited and the agents that you've lost over the next 12 months and compare them to one another. So what's the productivity of the agents that you're losing versus those that you're recruiting? Is there a dominant company that agents are leaving you to go to, which might speak to maybe relative value proposition imbalance between you and this other company, or maybe they're kind of doing a good job of like pitching something that they feel that you're kind of lacking in some way. So I think that's interesting at kind of a high level. Of course, you can then run all of the predictive analytics on your own office to generate a list of kind of who's likely to leave. But then on the real time aspect, we then have views in real time of who's doing what in the company, like a full view of everything that's happening. A listing went pending, something's expired, and those types of things. And you can communicate with the agents like directly on each of those, kind of manager to agent. But then we have some more, I guess, like we'd add context to those transactions. So it's Michael's first transaction at the company, or it's Tom's first listing in this zip code for him. And so those types of things, or the biggest sale of their career. So there's a number of different reasons that you could kind of engage in an even more intentional way with agents based on the fact that we know that this is kind of a notable event that just occurred. And the problem that we're trying to solve there is kind of connected back to that research, right? Agents want to proactively hear from their leadership in good times and bad, but also speed is super important. So again, silly analogy is like, you probably remember, Michael, the first person who celebrated you on your last birthday, right? Mm-hmm. Like your spouse or a family member or best friend, like, hey, Michael, tomorrow we're going to go out for dinner. I'm so excited, blah, blah, blah.
Sure. Yeah.
And you remember that. It's really powerful, right? And then, a really good friend of yours reaches out to you first thing in the morning. It's really powerful. Versus if I said to you, hey, Michael, I heard it was your birthday in February. I'm just getting around to the February birthdays. Congrats, right? Happy belated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Better than nothing, maybe, but also not super helpful, right? And this is the type of thing that I used to do at the brokerage, which is like, I used to get a report from the finance team, like everything that closed in the last 4 or 6 weeks. And it's like, what am I supposed to do with that transaction that happened 6 weeks ago? Oh, and by the way, it's just a number in a spreadsheet. Like, I don't know anything about whether that was like the biggest deal of their career or whether it was their first closing with the company or any of those types of things. And so the ability to very, very quickly be on top of every single thing that's happening.
Absolutely.
The exciting thing, I think, is we have many examples of reaching out. So I'll give you an example from 2 weeks ago. A manager reaches out to an agent and says, congrats. I noticed that's the biggest deal of your career. That's awesome. I'm here for you. Like, just such a great job. That started a conversation where the agent had sold a home, had actually helped their friends to buy a home. Right after they closed, their friend, the husband of the family, passed away. And then they had to sell the home because it was this kind of tough situation for the family. They had to sell the home. And the manager was celebrating the sale of the home to the agent. But that started a conversation about, it's a really dark time in my life. I feel so horrible about this. But it catalyzed for this agent kind of a really supportive moment with their manager because they were on top of what was going on. And that was maybe a missed opportunity that would have never been talked about between that manager and that agent, just from a kind of a 1 second, like, hey, I noticed you and I noticed that this happened. Let me know if you need some help. And so I think it's those kind of, both of us, like we're leading these technology companies that have a lot of data and have a lot of really interesting technology. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to maximize is better human to human connections, right? So how do we get to that point where more people can authentically communicate with each other at the right time, right? That's really what it's all about. And if technology can kind of help you to get to that point, great. We're not talking about a robot recruiting an agent end-to-end for you, or a robot selling a home to a first-time home buyer, right? It's ultimately how do you maximize your time in the best way? And that's where you can spend more time with clients in your case, with agents in our case. And I think that's, kind of a difficult example that I told, but also one that's like very real and palpable and like, is also kind of something that we can like facilitate as we kind of create better connections, even within a company.
Yeah. Wow. I'll tell you what, man, that's great. I love everything that I'm learning here about you guys. I mean, I think that there's still so many people that I talk to that when we're in this situation where they're asking us about if our AI voice does recruiting, and, candidly, we always point them in your direction because of exactly what you just said, right? It's got to be deeper than just having an automated, AI tool reaching out and having conversation. There has to be a contextual like awareness, but also the best way to grow. I'm going to botch this, but I think it's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The best time to start is today, right? And so when we think about retention, you may have missed those last three celebratory opportunities, but if you incorporate a great tool that can bring you the data insights that you need, today is the day to plant that seed, right? Plant that seed with that agent, and that can help you with your retention side of things, so that recruitment isn't a stress-based ecosystem. It's now just a bonus of growth, right?
Totally.
I think that's great. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time here. I mean, we've been going on for 40 minutes. This is just, like I told you, this is just going to be like fluid, but I do want to get your insights. Like how do you see the world of AI playing into your world? Tell me what the courted AI journey looks like. Is there one? Maybe you could share that with us.
Yeah, for sure. So we think about it in a couple different ways. We have the predictive analytics and the machine learning models that are kind of making assessments of the future, like so predicting behavior. So that's one thing that we have and we're going to continue to do. And there's some interesting additional things that we're doing on that front. The next piece is we use it to communicate. It's a personalized communication to the agent. So we're doing that today, and we have actually a huge upgrade to that that's coming out in the next 2 weeks, which we're super excited about. We then have a number of kind of newer research capabilities that are competitive research, but also market research. Things like, so market research and competitive research. What we've found is that many of our users, so often these will be team leaders and sales managers, they actually prefer, now with the prevalence of these conversational AI applications, they prefer to communicate, like speak or communicate to the platform versus go find the information that they want. So kind of an interesting thing that we've started to see that we didn't necessarily expect was agents are using Courted to say, okay, I have a family looking for a 2-bedroom home in Larchmont, New York, and they're looking to understand when to begin the home search based on inventory availability, pricing dynamics, and the opportunity to negotiate and get a good deal. Go find the information for me. And it's going to go through a whole bunch of different data tables to figure that out. So that's that we have today. In terms of what's coming in the future, we are building an agentic layer that can actually execute a lot of tasks for you, as opposed to just respond to a very kind of discrete request, and then more of an assistant type, kind of coach associated with that. And so, yeah, I think it's a really interesting time because we can bring a lot of these things to market quite quickly. But again, the danger is back to what I said at the beginning, right? Which is we don't want to see the technology and then look to figure out all the different places in the platform where we can apply it. We have to talk to the customer about what do you want and specifically what are you struggling with? And then we can kind of reverse engineer, is there an opportunity for some of this new technology to come together? So the idea of kind of voice doing the call for you is not one that we've kind of heard from our customers. Well, maybe they've asked for it, but we've been hesitant to kind of roll that piece out. But I guess I have the same question back to you with respect to kind of all of these changes, all the kinds of new tech. You guys are really on the cutting edge of some of this newer technology. So I'm curious how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we think that, the biggest value prop is the ability to drive awareness and grow your sphere, right? I think what we're seeing right now is people are really starting to turn a corner around the portal ecosystems and putting 80% of their business in something they can't control. And so the biggest way to kind of transcend market trends and things like that is to have a really healthy sphere. But where do you get the data? And that requires quite a lot of output. And so people are really seeing AI as a way to scalably grow their sphere in a healthy way to the point where it's transactional, right? And then it ultimately allows them to do the more detailed, personalized reach out, the actual picking up the phone and calls, right? Right now, the thought for a lot of these top producers of just cold calling into this robust database they've built over the last 15 years of their career gives them chills. They feel like they're going to throw up. So like where we come into play is that ability for us to say, let's scalably dive in. Let's scalably dive in and find out what is true about your database. And from there, let's create some actionable outreach strategies that ultimately align with who you are as a person, as a leader, but ultimately gains you that ability when you do reach out contextually. Now you can move to that next step. And let's also get to a place where we're constantly setting a capability for you to touch base with these people in a fluid way. And AI has given more scalability to that. Historically, you'd have to hire a $40,000 or $50,000 ISA that really can be a very, time consuming and thankless, engagement relationship. I'm a fan of ISAs. I think great ISAs are very hard to come by. And I think that once you have them, you tend to hold on to the reins really tight with them because you don't want to lose them. And it also can be a very time consuming position in that it's not exactly the sexiest or most exciting role. So a typical ISA will last 6 to 8 months. And that is a lot of bandwidth you have to commit as a leader to get them to get trained up, consistent, hold them accountable, get reporting done. And then every transaction, you're providing them with a percentage of the GCI. And so really when it comes down to it, we're in this place where the world has never been more opportunistic to now essentially drive your own engagement as your own self portal, so to speak, right? Have an IDX site that's super robust and data driven. Have a team of ISAs. When I was a director at Op City, we had an entire floor, 350 people calling and engaging with leads. And now you can do that with a really robust, well-trained contextual calling AI bot that essentially has the same power. And then from there, it's the ability to have that next stage, which is doing all the activities agents don't want to do, not just reactively, but proactively, to now grow that bullseye that typically only agents engage with maybe 1 to 3% of their total database on a fluid basis. And so when you can grow that 1 to 3% to be 5, 10, and 15 and 20% of your sphere is now nurture rich and ready to convert and close, that transcends markets. And so that takes time. And so you really have the opportunity now to incorporate AI into your business, to have those meaningful conversations in a future state, to prep your entire database to be transactional, not just now, but 6, 8, 12, 24 months. And to me, that's exciting. And we're getting a lot of feedback that now what's happening is people see that as rejuvenation for their business because they're used to and just accepting it as an inevitability to pay 40% as a referral fee or 35% or pay. I mean, hell, I talked to somebody that had spent over $300,000 in the realtor.com ecosystem. And I asked them, have they seen an ROI? And they said, we were seeing transactions. Like, that's not what I asked. Have you seen an ROI? If I don't know, there's a world I would spend $300,000 on a business position to not see any ROI. So it really has, really shifted the narrative that teams at any level can now see lower P&Ls, higher profitability, and scale towards a consistent amount of growth over the next 3 years with a small investment now that will do all the work for you. So, yeah. And I think it applies to the brokerage world and these teams that you're engaging with and these leadership groups that you're engaging with, that incorporating a data-driven tool like what you guys have with AI learning and now agentic, and that's super exciting to me. Like, I'm really excited to see how you guys roll that out, because I think that now gives the power to multiple different leaders to now drive relational retention and recruiting that matters. And I think what you're going to see is, while there's so much, commingling of brokerages now, I think it's going to be more about not just agent count, but like relation engagement that you have with those agents. And gone are the days, I think, where it's like, I'm going to go over here because they give me leads. I'm going to go over here because the splits are better. People are going back to the place where I'm staying here or I'm going here because they seem to actually give a shit. And I'm not forced to operate outside of what culturally I think is the right way to go as a business owner. So yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, for sure. I think, online leads are getting more and more expensive over time, and people are sitting on these wonderful databases. We could spend a lot of time getting bent out of shape, thinking about the merger of two companies, or we could focus on the gold that finding the gold that we have within our database. And, you have two choices. You can make 20,000 calls, or you can work with a platform to talk to the group that is kind of maybe the least attractive to you to go call, right? And that's kind of what you guys are helping them to do. And so, I'd imagine that some of your customers are probably thinking, do I feel comfortable with doing this? Of course, you're not going to have Speculo go talk to your child to wish them happy birthday.
Well, that's right.
To your own agent to talk about something else. But what about to someone that you met 20 years ago that you didn't really have a close connection with, that like you got their contact information and you're not going to have time to call them anyway? To me, I would think, well, why not? If I wasn't going to call them anyway, and I can validate that the quality of the outreach is going to be good, then, why not give it a shot? And so that's always been my kind of perspective.
Yeah. And I think the irony is that you actually are seeing that people actually have a longer nurture rich conversation with the AI ecosystem right now than they would with most human ISAs. And it is about the ability to connect to data feeds like the MLS, right? So somebody asked to direct defined questions about a specific property, and the AI can give them instant communication that says, that condo unit that you're looking at is actually a ground floor level. And because you do have two dogs, it does have a backyard. And by the way, that backyard is not shared with anyone else. So if that's important to you, have a backyard on a ground level for your two dogs, then this is a great opportunity for you to look at this property. But why don't I live connect you to an agent that specializes in the specific, condo development, and, let's make that transfer happen. And so then it's like, I'm excited because I'm like, okay, so now I have a bit of FOMO. I've got that price framing that's been done for me, but the real expert that's going to help get that deeper context is going to be the human component that comes with it. So, well, good. Awesome, man. Well, listen, Sean, I'm so grateful for you. I appreciate you getting on here. I know we took some time to get in the books, but I know you guys are busy. And I will say, from someone that's in the industry, I'm grateful from the perspective agents. I have a team here. I've got 6 agents we pour into, diligently. We actually define it as we've got 6 people who trust us with the goals of their family. And I think that what you're creating is bringing back the heart of the industry. And I think that that's super, super crucial and super cool. So I am grateful for all the time you guys are putting in and what you're creating. And I can't wait to see what else you guys create. And it's super awesome that they have a great leader like you and a team that you're building to be the one to lead this charge. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on today. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. And obviously we're playing in somewhat different spheres, but hopefully at some point there may be an opportunity for us all to work together as well. So yeah, thanks, and look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome, Sean. Thank you so much, man. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the Speculo Live podcast. We are very grateful for your support, as always. If you or someone that you know is interested to just get a consultation on how they're using AI in their real estate business, do not hesitate to hit us up through one of the links in our profile, or you can feel free to DM us on any one of the social channels. Stay tuned for more episodes, and make sure to like and subscribe to make sure that you get notified when our next podcast episode comes up. Thanks, guys.